Now, my purpose is to draw your attention to the booklet you have on open government data for effective participation. As most of you are aware, the Kenyan government has a new constitution since 2010, and there are two fundamental areas that we always talk about. One is the whole issue of public participation, that it's very important that citizens are able to participate in everyday political processes, especially in regard to what they want from the government, the kind of services they want, and how they want that services delivered. So public participation, as you realize in the last 2-3 months, at least in the press, it has not 3 months, 6 months or so, it has been a big issue. And I think the Ministry of ICT and Information has been on the forefront in that regard, trying to respond to that demand of the Constitution that people have to be involved in public forums, and especially on issues that deal with governance. And also, in the same Constitution, so I'll draw your attention to page 7. If you can be on page 7. At the very top, we mention Article 35. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm one of those guys who mention articles just to impress. But Article 35 of the Bill of Rights emphasizes this whole idea of citizen participation, public participation. And the only way you can participate is actually if you have information, if you have relevant information, and if you have access to information. That's why on the access to information, you see Article 34 and 35 emphasizing the need and the reasons why we should have access to information. So information can be available, but can it be accessed both in quality and in quantity? And so that's our justification for this research, that we're trying to understand to what extent is the government implementing this whole idea of public participation, through which means, which I have actually response to very well, especially when it comes to the means. And on our side, looking at the impact of this information in our everyday life. So if you move to page 9, if you open page 9, we look at the study objectives. So what is it we wanted to find out in this research, and what's the value of that? There are 4 points there, but overall I'll summarize by saying that we're very much interested in understanding the open data, the information we receive from the government, and the type of information we receive from the government, and how is that information helping us as citizens, as Kenyans, to be able to be part of the county, part of the national government. So for example, in number 1, we're looking at the impact of the Kenyan government's open data initiative. There's of course a history that you'll be given shortly by Zach, and to see whether, and if so how, it's assisting marginalized communities and groups in accessing key social services and information such as health and education. The only word I want to underline there is marginalized communities. Well, we normally, nowadays, we don't talk so much about marginalized communities. We talk about low-income communities or parts of the country. It's a language adopted by the World Bank. So this whole idea of third world countries developed is kind of disappearing somehow. So we talk about the low-income areas. So Kibera and parts of Isiolo, where the deputy governor comes from, Malindi, there are sections that we can classify or categorize as low-income areas. So the question then is, did we meet these objectives as stated there? That will lead us to the findings. But I also want to mention something about methodology. As you can clearly see, we used focus groups, then we used quantitative questionnaires, and we did some in-depth interviews. Now, there is a whole issue of sampling. How do you sample whoever you question? I wouldn't go to the details because I realize we're slightly behind time, but see, the only word I can use is that we did purposeful sampling, okay? We did purposeful sampling, and as you know, purposeful sampling has various dimensions to it. It could be clustering, quota, or whichever other forms that we have. So we did purposeful sampling, and it's most of it explained there. So the last point I want to make before we begin to discuss the findings, you will see in the booklet there are two sections. There's one, part one, which talks about the informal settlements or the low-income areas, so the research in Isiolo, Mombasa, and Nairobi here in Kibera. So that's the low-income areas. But from page, there's a national findings page. What will that be? Page 69. If you open page 69, you will see that sometime back we did a research, a nationwide research on the same issue of open data initiative by the government. And it's very interesting to contrast the findings of the micro study in these informal settlements with the national findings. It's very, very interesting. And we have some interesting findings that at this point I would like to invite Zach to, am I right? No? Yeah, I'd like to invite the MC to kind of introduce the next section. So basically, I know I've run very quickly, but that's because we are kind of running behind time, and I wouldn't want to keep everyone waiting. This was supposed to be a media breakfast meeting with stakeholders. Yeah, I think it's still breakfast time. So if we are late, we'll ask you to bear with us, because that's what we announced, that it's a media breakfast. But in between, we decided to have some little discussion so that you also can have a chance to raise questions. But otherwise, thank you very much. I hope you find this very useful. If you have any questions, please contact us today or another time. Thank you very much.